Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, live here from the Philippine Arena. Here are the headlines tonight.
Lockdown in Malaysia. Philippine Ambassador to Malaysia, Charles C. Jose, explains the situation there as the country starts a 2-week total lockdown to address the rising COVID cases nationwide.
Sigma, not stigma. World Health Organization announces COVID-19 variants are to be known by letters of the Greek alphabet to avoid stigmatizing nations where they were first detected.
Danta rains causing floods. Low-lying and flood-prone areas engulfed by floods. Portions of national highways declared non-passable to vehicles, and affected residents evacuated to safer grounds in the Caraga region.
Devastating New Zealand floods. New Zealand Prime Minister has just issued the order towards flood-hit areas of the country's South Island, expressing shock at the destruction left when 3 months worth of rain fell in 2 days.
And we start with the World Health Organization announcing today that COVID-19 variants are to be known by letters of the Greek alphabet to avoid stigmatizing nations where they were first detected. Under the new system, the variants of concern take on the following names. The hitherto so-called British variants B117 becomes Alpha. The B1351, first discovered in South Africa, becomes Beta, while the Brazilian P1 becomes Gamma. The so-called Indian variant, the B1617, is split into sublineages, of which the B16172 variant of concern becomes Delta, and the B1617.1 variant of interest is called Kappa. Under the new system, the variants of concern take on the following names. Now, earlier this month, the U.S. President Joe Biden signed a hate crimes law aimed at protecting Asian Americans who have suffered a surge in attacks during the COVID-19 pandemic. And they laid some of the blame with former President Donald Trump, who repeatedly referred the COVID-19 as the China virus. Now, the Greek alphabet contains 24 letters, but there is no plan yet as to where to go next if they are exhausted.
Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, reiterates that funding is crucial to help the organization fight current and future challenges more effectively. A year and a half after the start of the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed more than 3.5 million people, member states have agreed to strengthen the organization at the heart of the global response to the crisis. Take a look.
The reality is we still have a lot of work to do to end this pandemic. We're very encouraged that cases and deaths are continuing to decline globally. But it would be a monumental error for any country to think the danger has passed. The tailored and consistent use of public health measures in combination with equitable vaccination remains the way out. I urge all member states to commit to supporting the targets I set out on Monday to achieve vaccination of at least 10% of the population of all countries by the end of September and at least 30% by the end of the year. It all has to be funded. We cannot pay people with praise. And WHO cannot grow stronger without sustainable financing. For the long-term strengthening of WHO, I urge member states to seize this pivotal moment and chart a course to a sustainable financial model through the recommendations of the working group.
Monday's resolution called on all countries to increase their ability to detect new threats and to communicate such threats effectively at home and abroad. To ensure all nations do their part, the resolution asked Tedros to consider creating a pilot project in which countries would submit their pandemic preparedness plans to regular peer reviews by other member states, just as they undergo reviews of their rights situation before the UN Human Rights Council. The resolution stopped short of explicitly backing the experts' recommendation to hand the WHO broader powers to launch investigations or communicate about health threats without waiting for a green light from the countries concerned.
Now, Peru on Monday more than doubled its official coronavirus death toll, becoming the country with the highest COVID-19 mortality per capita anywhere in the world. Take a look.
Ya realmente no ha habido un buen manejo de parte del Estado, ni tampoco un sinceramiento de parte del MINSA, ¿no? Que debió realmente acercar esa cifra a la ciudadanía, ¿no? Para que la gente tenga realmente conciencia, ¿no? De lo que está pasando en nuestro país. Porque con una cifra tan baja como 60 y pico mil, creo que la gente se sintió bastante confiada, ¿no? Y no tomaron en algunos casos las medidas respectivas, ¿no?
Que no se podía controlar porque nosotros teníamos un sistema de salud precario anteriormente a esto. Entonces, cuando un sistema de salud no es bueno, ya cualquier endemia o pandemia colapsa. El sistema de salud colapsó en el Perú.
Pero también un poco indignante que nuestras autoridades, nuestros gobernantes no hagan nada tampoco porque esto ya pare, ¿no? Porque como sabemos bien es cierto, hay vacunas en estos momentos, pero no son las suficientes que en realidad todo el Perú necesita para poder para que pueda llegar a todos los lugares, ¿no? Y la verdad que es lamentable.
Now, the government said it had raised the count from 69,342 to 180,764 on the advice of a panel of health experts, which found there had been an undercount. With the adjustment, Peru now has the highest coronavirus mortality per capita of any country, with 5,484 deaths per million inhabitants, according to an AFP count. Hungary is in a distant second place with 3,077 deaths per million. Peru has registered more than 1.9 million infections to date and has in recent months suffered acute shortages of oxygen to treat coronavirus patients. Prime Minister Violeta Bermudez said the toll was adjusted on the advice of a panel which suggested modifying Peru's record-keeping criteria. Peru started its vaccination campaign on February 9, but it has been slow and has so far reached 5% of the adult population with at least one shot. The Andean nation has battled a second pandemic wave since December with a record of almost 13,000 infections on April 1, and there are nearly 12,000 COVID patients in hospital, but the health system has been able to breathe a little since the peak of 15,547 occupied beds recorded last April 20.
Here in the Philippines, President Duterte last night announced that the general community quarantine classification in Metro Manila and 4 nearby provinces has been extended until June 15. Take a look.
This is for June 1 to 30, 2021. The following areas will be under modified enhanced community quarantine MECQ from June 1 to 15, 2021. The city of Santiago and Cagayan in Region 2. Apayao, Benguet, and Ifugao in CAR. Puerto Princesa in Region 4B. Iloilo City. Zamboanga City, Zamboanga Sibugay, Zamboanga del Sur, and Zamboanga del Norte, Butuan City and Agusan del Sur in Caraga. Nandito naman tayo sa General Community Quarantine. NCR, Bulacan, Rizal, Laguna, and Cavite with restrictions. Itong restriction, ito yung parang limited number of persons, magkain, whenever there is a grouping of human beings, talagang susundin ninyo na social distancing, lahat na. These are the restrictions. Alam ninyo yan. Alam na ninyo yan. Baguio City, Kalinga, Mountain Province, and Abra in Car. Isabela, Nueva Vizcaya, and Quirino in Region 2. Batangas and Quezon in Region 4A. Iligan City in Region 10. Davao City in Region 11. Lanao del Sur and Cotabato City in Barn. The rest of the Philippines will be under modified general community quarantine from June 1 to 30, 2021.
Only activities that remain prohibited under GCQ with additional restrictions are indoor sports and tourist attractions, as well as meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions, or MICE.
In a related development, presidential spokesperson Harry Roque said the president also extended the restrictions for inbound travel from 7 countries from June 1 until the 15th of this month. Take a look.
Tungkol naman po sa travel ban, epektibo ngayong araw hanggang 15 ng Hunyo, 1 ng Hunyo. Bawal pa rin ang inbound travel na manggaling mula India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Oman, at United Arab Emirates. Paumanhin po doon sa mga naaantala na bumalik sa Pilipinas galing sa mga lugar nito, pero ito po ay kailangan para nga po maiwasan ang pagpasok ng tinatawag na Indian variant.
At least 56 samples sent to the University of the Philippines or Philippine Genome Center, UP-PGC, have tested positive for coronavirus disease 2019 variants that emanated from other countries, the Department of Health in Region 9 said Monday. In a statement, DOH-9 said 2 of the 56 samples tested positive for the B117 variant first detected in the United Kingdom, and 54 samples tested positive for the B1351 variant, which was first detected in South Africa. In addition, a sample tested positive for the P3 variant, first detected here in the Philippines, currently classified as a variant of interest. DOH-9 reiterated its call for the public to vigorously practice all the minimum public health standards as we aggressively push for COVID-19 vaccination rollout with an urgent goal of population protection through mass immunization.
Meanwhile, the Department of Health is still waiting for the guidance of the World Health Organization on the report of a hybrid COVID variant detected in Vietnam. Let's listen in.
Thank you, Nick. Unang-una, kailangan natin maintindihan ang proseso. So ang proseso po kapag tayo ay nakaka-detect ng additional mutations o bagong variant kung sakali sa isang bansa, isinusumiti po ito sa WHO. Dahil ang WHO po ang nagmamanage nitong GSAID na tinatawag na network. It's a system where you classify the variants of concern para lahat ng bansa alam yan at nakapag-iingat. So nagbigay din ng pahayag ang WHO over the weekend at ang sabi nila, they have not received the full details of this apparent variant na tinatawag sa Vietnam. At aantayin daw po nila na makapag-verify sila, makapag-aral ng mabuti para makapagbigay ng guidance para sa ating para sa mga member countries ng WHO. So for now, we still do not have sufficient evidence for this. Kailangan lang po natin pag-igtingin pa rin ang ating pagpapatupad ng minimum health protocols. Kailangan natin lagi tandaan, whatever variants that there may be dito po sa ating bansa, kung tayo po ay strictly nagpapatupad ng health protocols natin at saka tayo ay nagpabakuna, tayo po ay protektado. So alalahanin po natin yan, hindi po natin kailangan magpanik dahil po dito sa balitang ito. Pag-igtingin lang po natin ang pagpapatupad ng ating health protocols and we will be protected from any of these variants.
Last weekend, the health minister of Vietnam said they have discovered a new COVID variant that spreads quickly through the air, and it's said to be a combination of the variants first found in India and the United Kingdom. In the country, meanwhile, data from DOH show that the University of the Philippines, Philippine Genome Center, and UP National Institutes of Health have sequenced a total of 7,547 COVID-positive samples to detect the variants. And of these, 2,494 have variants being closely monitored by DOH, with only 26 cases remaining active. Now, the Undersecretary reiterated the need for strict adherence to minimum public health standards and early detection and isolation of cases to minimize transmission of the virus and further prevent the emergence of new variants. DOH also encourages everyone to get vaccinated for added protection against the severe form of the disease.
In other news, Philippine Ambassador to Malaysia, Charles Passet, explains the situation there as the country starts a 2-week total lockdown today, June 1st, to address rising COVID-19 cases nationwide. In an interview with ASEAN in Focus today, Ambassador Passet said that there has been a recent spike in COVID-19 cases in Malaysia, with the highest recorded at 9,000 cases in a single day. Here's some experts or excerpts from that interview. Let's listen.
Tama po, no? Nag-reimpose ng nationwide total lockdown ng Malaysia. It will be for 2 weeks starting today until June 14. And of course, mas mahigpit, no, yung pagpapatupad nila ng movement control during this total lockdown. Tinatawag nilang total lockdown. And under this total lockdown, only yung mga essential sectors ng economy are permitted to operate. Naglabas ng listahan ng pamahalaan ng Malaysia, 17 no, ang pinapayagan nilang sectors na magbukas. Of course, kasama rito mga mostly manufacturing and manufacturing-related services related to food, defense, communication, security, at of course, kabilang sa lockdown ay bawal pa rin ang interstate and interdistrict travel, and only 2 people per household are permitted to go out, no, to buy their essentials within a 10-kilometer radius. And sarado muna lahat ang mga paaralan, yung mga higher education online, pero yung mga kindergarten, etc. ay pinatigil muna pansamantala. So, well, I would like to add, no, na the Malaysian government decided to reimpose this total lockdown kasi nga because of the resurgence, no, ng COVID-19 virus. Recently, there's been a big increase in the number of new cases. As a matter of fact, umabot ng more than 9,000 in a single day, no, yung highest na naitalang number of new cases. Well, of course, may inaasahan tayong magiging effect nito, no, sa ating mga kababayan. Una-una, itong total lockdown ay magkakaroon ng malaking impact, no, sa economy ng Malaysia, sa businesses, and of course, sa livelihood and employment and income ng mga tao rito. At sa analysis, no, ng mga experts, ay they predict, no, na mas maraming businesses, especially yung mga micro, small, and medium enterprises, ang baka magsara, no, dahil pa dito sa total lockdown na to. Dahil this is already the third, no, na MCO, and this time in total lockdown is similar to the one imposed in March last year. So hindi pa nakaka-recover yung mga businesses from the previous MCOs, at hindi enough ang kanilang buffer, no, para i-cushion yung impact ng total lockdown this time. So sa mga projections, of course, hindi nila marireach yung mga projected GDP growth nitong second quarter compared to the second quarter last year, pati yung GDP growth na rin, no? Para sa buong taon ng 2021. As far as our mga kababayan natin ang concerned, of course, sa mga magsasarang negosyo, maapektuhan yung mga kababayan natin, especially nagtatrabaho sa services sector, tourism-related, sa mga hotels, etc. In terms of mga assistance ng embassy, well, patuloy tayong nagbibigay ng assistance sa abot na ating makakaya in different ways, no? Tumutulong tayo. For example, this time may mga nahirapan pa rin umuwi ng Pilipinas kasi nga maraming flights ang nakakancel dahil sa quota, no, na nililimit ang arriving passengers sa Manila. So maraming flights ang nakakancel. So marami sa ating kababayan ang hindi makauwi, na tapos na ang contract, expired na ang visa. Tumutulong tayo sa kanila, no, in terms of getting special passes from the Malaysian immigration, endorsing yung mga kanilang mga request for extension. At we are also making representations with the authorities in Manila para ma-increase yung yung quota, no, ng mga passengers, yung bilang ng mga arriving passengers. And of course, yung mga in terms of passports, tulad in the past, no, we inaalaw natin yung nagbibigay tayo ng 2 years na extension sa mga passports para sa hindi makapunta rito, especially yung magagaling ng Sabah and Sarawak. They can mail their passports to us and we extend their passports for 2 years, no, para nang sa ganun ay pwede na ma-extend ang kanilang mga work permits.
Sa ngayon po ba, ilan po ang mga Pilipino natin diyan sa Malaysia?
Ang ating conservative estimate ay nasa around 900,000, no? Kabilang na rito mga documented, pati mga undocumented kababayan natin. Sa aming mga report na natatanggap, no, may total na bilang na 1,119 na mga Filipinos ang na naging positive, no, for this COVID-19 virus, and among this number ay meron na 13 ang namatay. Gusto ko na idagdag muna, no, na parang malaki ang bilang ng mga Filipino na nag-COVID positive dito at compared sa mga ibang places, no. The reason for this is yung clustering, no. Nung una nag-breakout yung pandemic, maraming Pilipino ang nag-positive, yung mga umattend nung tabligh gathering dun sa Sri Petaling Mosque sa Selangor. May mga kababayan tayo nagbiyahe papuntang Malaysia na members ng tabligh nag-attend nun.
Yes.
At may mga madrasa students tayo na require ng kanilang eskwelahan na mag-attend din ng gathering na yon. So that was a big cluster, no, last year. And sumunod nun, marami ring clusters ang na-discover, no, sa mga immigration detention centers at sa loob ng mga prison. So but otherwise hindi naman talaga widespread, no, yung Pilipino na nagkaka-COVID positive. And in terms of yung mga assistance, yung mga lumalapit sa amin nung last year, yung mga members ng tabligh, ay natulungan natin sila, no, in terms of welfare assistance, accommodation, food, pati yung repatriation pag-uwi nila ng Pilipinas, yung mga na-clear na, no, na safe to travel.
Mr. Ambassador, yung vaccination po, how is it going po there in Malaysia?
Ongoing kanilang vaccination, no. Ang Malaysia, meron silang National Immunization Program which was launched in February this year, no. And 3 phases yun. About 2 million Malaysians so far, no. 1,700,000 plus yung first dose and 1,014,000 naka-second dose na. So that's 2,700,000 plus out of the 11,788,000 na nagpa-register. So that's about 24% no, nung nakarehistro ang nabakunahan na. Pero that's only, well, 12% no, if they plan to inoculate 70% ng kanilang 33 million population. Nakapag-register na po kami. We're just waiting for our names to be called.
What are the vaccines available, Mr. Ambassador?
Dito po ay available ang Pfizer, Sinovac, and AstraZeneca. So, meron po silang 44.8 million doses ng Pfizer, 12 million doses ng Sinovac, and 610,000 ng AstraZeneca na parating po in June and July.
Mr. Ambassador, matanong ko rin po, meron po ba tayong emergency or triage plan for Filipinos in case of disasters, calamities, or say another surge of diseases?
Well, tulad po ng the rest with ng ating mga foreign service posts, no? Meron po kaming contingency plan dito sa embassy for any emergency, no? Of course, nandito po yan. At ready po kaming i-implement yan anytime po na kakailanganin.
Sir, baka meron kayong huling mensahe sa atin pong mga kababayan na nanonood po sa inyo ngayon.
Well, una-una po, no? Gusto ko lang po i-remind ating mga kababayan, no? Let's contribute, no, sa effort ng ating host country, Malaysia, sa kanila pong effort to curb itong pag-spread o yung pag-increase ng bilang ng COVID-19 sa pamagitan po na pagsunod, no, sa kanilang mga established na mga SOPs nang sa gayon ay makatulong tayo na bumaba, no, ang bilang ng COVID cases ito at nang po sa gayon ay hindi po hindi mag-collapse, no, yung public healthcare system ng Malaysia. At doon po sa mga kababayan natin na may mga pangailangan, wag po silang mag-atubili na lumapit lang po sa embassy para po idulog ang kanila pong pangangailangan. Maraming pong paraan para po ma-reach ng embassy. Pwedeng by telephone, meron po kaming mobile phone which is being manned 24/7, no? By email, by Facebook, makakontak po kami.
Mag-iingat po kayo lagi and thank you for your time. Mabuhay po kayo, Mr. Ambassador.
Maraming salamat din po. It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the news continues here on Eagle News. CJ and I will be back right after this break.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Kumanta, sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Welcome back. China reported the world's first human infection of the H1N1 bird flu strain today, but said the risk of it spreading widely among people was low. A 41-year-old man was admitted to hospital with fever symptoms in the eastern city of Shenzhen on April 28 and was diagnosed with the H1N1 a month later. That according to China's National Health Commission in an online statement. It also described H1N1 as low pathogenic, less likely to cause death or severe illness in birds. The NHC said there had been no human cases of H1N1 previously reported in the world, and several strains of bird flu have been found among animals in China, but mass outbreaks in humans are rare. The last human epidemic of bird flu in China occurred in late 2016 to 2017, with the H7N9 virus. Following recent avian flu outbreaks in Africa and Eurasia, the head of China's Center for Disease Control and Prevention last week urged stricter surveillance in poultry farms, markets, and wild birds. COVID-19 was first detected at a food and animal market in the central Chinese city of Wuhan in late 2019.
Now, in other news, police in Miami, Florida, kept up a manhunt for 3 gunmen who attacked a crowd at a banquet hall early Sunday. They killed 2 people and wounded 21. Take a look.
These are acts of domestic terrorism. Anytime a shooter strikes 20 people, most of whom have nothing to do with whatever their issue is, anytime they strike them down and they die in our community, it is meant to keep us from having a regular life here in Miami-Dade County. It is to keep us from going out and enjoying ourselves. It is to keep us from being a part of the economic system that is. And if you're in a neighborhood that is suffering from violence, if you're in a neighborhood where you're wondering whether or not your children will be victim or your friends will be victim to gun violence, you don't have to tell your aunts and your uncles, your cousins and your brothers. You don't have to let them know that you witnessed a crime. Just call the anonymous helpline. Any tip that leads us to apprehending people who would have the nerve, the audacity to shoot down a group of people in the community don't deserve to be in our community.
Newly released surveillance video showed the masked attackers getting out of a Nissan Pathfinder. They were armed with assault rifles and handguns and fired into the crowd of concert goers, leaving more than 20 injured and 2 dead. They returned moments later. Police were seeking help from the community in finding the shooters. Florida remains marked by the 2016 shooting at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, in which a gunman killed 49 people, many of them young Cuban Americans. Over the past year, gun-related homicides have surged nationwide. While the coronavirus pandemic slowed the workplace violence as more people stayed home, it also saw record gun sales. In March last year, the number of weekly federal background checks on gun buyers surpassed 1 million for the first time, the New York Times reported. Then this spring, the number hit 1.2 million 1 week, with many first.
In the first nationwide reopening of schools in Myanmar since the military seized power, students in Sittwe, the capital of Rakhine State, turned up for schools with policemen deployed to guard the school entrances. Take a look. Now, Rakhine is one of the few states where students still show up for schools due to the low activities of protesters and the limited presence of security forces. Elsewhere in the country, though, both students and teachers are defying the junta's call for classes to resume. Junta-run media has in recent days carried pictures of functionaries watching school registrations and promising that parents will be satisfied with the return of classes. Some university classes are already back in session, but boycotts have seen widespread absences on both sides of the teaching lectern.
In other news, a decade of war in Syria has left nearly 500,000 people dead, a war monitor said today. In a new toll that includes 100,000 recently confirmed deaths. The Britain-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the conflict has claimed 494,438 lives arrested in 2011 with a brutal repression of anti-government protests. The previous tally issued by the observatory in March this year stood at more than 388,000 dead. A deal brokered by Turkey and Russia in March 2020 froze a government offensive on the rebel-controlled Idlib enclave, which many feared would have caused human suffering on a scale yet unseen in the conflict. The attention on both sides has since turned to battling the COVID-19 pandemic, and 2020 saw the lowest number of conflict-related deaths since the start of the war, with 10,000, according to the observatory. Today, the Damascus government controls more than two-thirds of the country after a string of Russia-backed victories since 2015. President Bashar al-Assad, in power since 2000, was re-elected in May for a fourth 7-year term.
In other news, there's word that UN nuclear inspectors have been cut off from information about Iran's nuclear program for 3 months now. In a separate report, the IAEA said Iran's stockpile of enriched uranium is around 16 times the limit laid down in the 2015 deal with world powers. It gave an estimate of a stockpile of 3,241 kilograms, but said it was not able to verify the total. The two reports issued by the International Atomic Energy Agency on Monday are the first substantive reports since Iran suspended some inspections in February. The agency also said Iran has failed to answer questions regarding a fourth site where natural uranium may have been present between 2002 and 2003 in the form of a metal disc. Iran and world powers are engaged in talks in Vienna to rescue the 2015 nuclear deal after former U.S. President Donald Trump walked away from it in 2018 and reimposed crippling sanctions on Tehran. Trump's successor, President Joe Biden, has signaled his willingness to revive the plan.
Meanwhile, dozens of leading Hong Kong democracy activists could face up to life in prison for organizing an unofficial primary election. Prosecutors confirmed Monday in the most sweeping use yet of Beijing's strict new security law. Police charged the 47 activists with subversion after they organized a non-binding vote last year to choose candidates for an ultimately postponed local election. The defendants say they were simply taking part in opposition politics, but authorities accused them of vicious plot to subvert the government by seeking a majority in the city's partially elected legislature. On Monday, the defendants appeared en masse for the first time in nearly 3 months at a hearing in which a judge granted a request by prosecutors to have the case upgraded to the city's high court. Offenses heard in that court start at 7 years imprisonment for those who are convicted. The maximum penalty under the new security law is life in prison. Beijing has moved to quash dissent in the semi-autonomous city after huge and sometimes violent pro-democracy demonstrations in 2019. Eagle News will be back with more stories. Please don't go away.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision-making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back. Low-lying and flood-prone areas engulfed by floods. Portions of national highways declared non-passable to vehicles, and affected residents evacuated to safer grounds. These were the scenarios in different provinces in the Caraga region as heavy and non-stop rains caused by Tropical Storm Dante swept through these areas today. Local government units, or LGUs, activated their emergency response units early today in anticipation of the impacts of Dante in their localities. The northern portion of the Dinagat Islands province and the Siargao and Bucas Grande Islands and Surigao del Norte were still under tropical cyclone wind signal number 2 based on the 2 p.m. severe weather bulletin of Pagasa. Other areas in the region, including Agusan del Norte, the northern portion of Agusan del Sur, Surigao del Sur, and other areas in Surigao del Norte are under signal number 1. The Philippine Coast Guard in Dinagat Islands ordered the temporary suspension of trips of all vessels and watercrafts Tuesday morning due to the cyclone warning raised in this area. Trips of sea vessels and watercraft were also ordered suspended by PCG in Surigao del Sur and Surigao del Norte. In Agusan del Norte, floods were reported by the Provincial Disaster Risk Reduction Management Office in the areas of Santiago, Tubay, Jabonga, and Cabadbaran City.
In other environment news, New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern toured flood-hit areas of the country's South Island on Tuesday, expressing shock at the destruction left when 3 months' worth of rain fell in 3 days. She said the number one priority is reinstating transport links after visiting areas of the South Island hit by a 1 in 100 year earthquake.
We've just had an opportunity to get a better look at some of the extensive damage as a result of really what is a 1 in 100 year flood. Extensive flooding in farmland areas, obviously damage to transport links. The number one priority at the moment is reinstating those transport links, with the bridge just south of Ashburton out of action. Work is underway as we speak to try and reinstate some of those alternative routes. 500,000 has come through from the Minister, given that this is now being lifted to a medium adverse weather event. That means that that funding can flow through to those who are able to directly on the ground support particularly our farmers who have been heavy hit.
Rivers burst their banks as a weather system dumped 400 millimeters or 15.5 inches of rain in 2 days, an amount meteorologists said exceeded the entire rainfall so far this year in some areas. Authorities issued a rare red weather warning and declared a state of emergency in the Canterbury region, one of the South Pacific nations' farming hubs. Entire communities, including 35,000 people in the town of Ashburton, were left isolated by the floodwaters. And Ardern said crews were scrambling to restore road and rail links. While hundreds of people were forced to evacuate, there have been no reports of serious injuries.
Another environment news, the Group of Seven Wealthy Nations, or G7, agreed to end state financing of coal-fired power plants by the end of this year and to mostly decarbonize electricity supplies. Arian Celestino for this report.
Hi, here is my report in the United Kingdom. The Group of Seven Wealthy Nations on Friday agreed to end state financing of coal-fired power plants by the end of this year and to mostly decarbonize electricity supplies in the 2030s. Ahead of a leaders' meeting in Britain next month, G7 countries' climate and environment ministers also reaffirmed their commitment to limit keep temperature rises below 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2050, following a two-day virtual meeting. Scientists say any increases beyond that will trigger uncontrollable climate change. UK lawmaker Alex Sharma, who is president-designated of the COP26 UN climate, set meet to be held in Glasgow in November, said the consensus was a clear signal to the world that coal is on the way out. The move follows a recommendation from the International Energy Agency earlier this week that all future fossil fuels projects must be scrapped if the road is to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050 and limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The G7 countries, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United States, and Britain are home to major car makers and further agreed to significantly accelerate the shift away from petrol in the transport industry within the decade. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Arian Celestino. We will live in interesting times.
Thank you, Arian. In other news, Iceland's glaciers have lost around 750 square kilometers or 290 square miles, or 7% of their surface since the turn of the millennium, due to global warming, a study published on Monday showed. The glaciers, which cover more than 10% of the country's land mass, shrank in 2019 to 10,400 square kilometers, the study in the Icelandic scientific journal Jokal said. Since 1890, the land covered by glaciers has decreased by almost 2,200 square kilometers, or 18%. But most or almost a third of this decline has occurred since 2000, according to the recent calculations by glaciologists, geologists, and geophysicists. Experts have previously warned that Iceland's glaciers are at risk of disappearing entirely by 2200.
Tennis star Naomi Osaka withdrew today from the French Open, citing mental health concern, and she didn't want to be a distraction. Naomi Osaka withdrew from the French Open on Monday following the bitter fallout from her decision to boycott all media activity, revealing she has suffered long bouts of depression and will now take some time away from the court. She's been fined $15,000 on Sunday and threatened with disqualification for skipping out a mandatory news conference following her first round win. Now, she claimed on the eve of Roland Garros that such post-match requests were akin to kicking people when they are down and that they had a detrimental effect on her mental health. Osaka tweeted that she suffered bouts of depression since 2018 and that public speaking makes it worse. Osaka said she has apologized to organizers over the affair, which has dominated the early stages of the French Open ever since she warned last week that she would not carry out any media activity. Serena Williams said she sympathized with Osaka. Martin Navratilova said she fully supported Osaka's decision. Teenage American player Coco Gauff tweeted her support for Osaka. She said, "Stay strong. I admire your vulnerability." Osaka is the world's highest earning female athlete, making $37.4 million in 2020.
Finally, in our news, Australia's softball team became the first athletes to arrive in Japan for the Olympics on Tuesday in a major step forward for the pandemic postponed games as organizers battle coronavirus fears. Take a look.
選手はみんなほらもうここと球場のあれしかないからね大事と思いますよせっかく来たのにね会えないもね練習も見れないしねそうちょっと辛いですね。
スポーツ選手にとってはすごくオリンピック大事ですので応援したい気持ちの方が私は大きいんですね。
いやまだちょっと分かんないですね。安心安全って言ってるけど何が安心で何が安全じゃないのかっていうのはよく分かんないし口ではそうに言ってるけどだからまだできるかどうか分かんないんじゃないですか。
確かに直接の交流はできないということではありますので、残念なことではあるかとは思いますけども、今回で終わりではなく、将来もですね、長く交流が続けていければというふうに考えておりますので、継続した交流を続けていきたいと思います。
Polls show most in Japan want the Olympics postponed again or canceled altogether, despite assurances from organizers that strict rules will keep athletes and the public safe. 3 hours after landing, an official confirmed the group had all tested negative and they left for their training camp in Ota City, around 100 kilometers or 60 miles north of Tokyo. The delegation will be confined to one floor of their hotel with no family members allowed to join them. Many towns in Japan have canceled plans to host Olympic training camps over virus fears, but Ota's mayor Masayoshi Shimizu said the city was very pleased to be welcoming the team.
Well, it's a wait and see, but they're there.
Yes, and we actually have a lot of athletes, Filipino athletes, who are in Japan right now.
That's
true. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Nancy J. Hero live here at the Philippine Arena. Thank you so much for joining us again tomorrow.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.